Mobile hunters, if you're interested in upping your mobile game, then head to tetherednation.com and check out their saddle gear. There are a few things you can actually buy that will help you become a better deer hunter or give you the freedom to hunt any tree or any situation. This is the reason why I started saddle hunting in the first place and why I use Tethered's gear. I can honestly say that Tethered's saddle gear has changed how I hunt for the better. Big tree, little tree, from the ground, it doesn't matter. I'm untethered by my gear to hunt the best setup for the situation, instead of hunting for a tree that my gear can use. My current core setup consists of the Phantom saddle, tethered one sticks, and the Predator platform, along with an assortment of their accessories. So if you want to up your mobile game, head over to tetherednation.com. If you're like me, you spend lots of time poring over maps, looking at weather data, all in an effort to help predict when and where my best times to hunt will be. It'd be nice if there was a reliable source with all this information in one place. Enter the Spartan Forge app. Unlike some other predictive apps on the market, Spartan Forge was created from military combat intelligence experience tailored for hunters, and stands at the nexus of machine learning and whitetail deer hunting. No more man-made algorithms. This is a predictive model based on real GPS collared deer data, historical and predictive weather, and the next level of mapping imagery, all at my fingertips. I've been using the iOS app this season, and it has replaced all my other mapping tools. Visit SpartanForge.ai and sign up today, or head to your iOS or Android app store. Use the promo code TRUTH to save some money and download it today. Welcome to the Truth from a Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 278. Today I'm joined by my buddy Bill Thompson, and we are discussing hunting stags and deer data related to scrapes, so stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you are feeling fine on this 13th day of April. Sitting here sipping a little coffee. Got up this morning, let the dog out, and walked outside. And it was a nice, brisk 40 degrees. And it made me feel like I should be out scouting. It's like one of those perfect mornings. Now, it's not great for shed hunting because it's kind of bright out. Well, actually, it's really bright out. But it was one of those mornings where it was like, man, I should be out in the woods walking around with the dog. It's nice and cold out, or not super cold, but brisk, where it's like you're not going to get too hot, just like a perfect day for it. But unfortunately, I have some family errands that I have to run today. But I did get a chance to get out and scout yesterday. And of course, yesterday morning, it basically pissed rain all morning. And I wasn't really interested in walking around in the rain for the whole day. So I waited till the rain kind of eased up because my family is out of town. The kiddos actually stayed with my parents this past weekend, and my wife was away with some of her girlfriends for a birthday party. So I had the weekend to myself. So the big plan was like, hey, let's get some scouting done. Looking at the weather, I thought maybe that might pan out, but unfortunately Saturday was kind of a half day, I guess, if you will. But with that said, I was able to get out and actually traipse through the timber, the area that I really kind of wanted to check out. There was one, I guess really kind of two spots that I hadn't yet completely assessed. One spot is a place that I had turkey hunted in the past. And that can kind of, for all intents and purposes, that can kind of wait, because I'm probably going to end up turkey hunting that spot here in the next couple of weeks. It's local to me. It's not too far away. The only bummer is though, while I was out this weekend, man, the green up really kind of started already. To where I already was not able to see as well in the timber as I had been able to in the past. Now, the ground still isn't completely covered, but it's like everything's just kind of starting to bud and things like that, to where your visibility, because one of my favorite parts of being able to scout during the winter or early spring is that there's not squat on the trees. And so if you think you see something 100 yards away in the timber or whatever it is, pull up some binos and you can kind of scout really quick an area with your binos. So that part of it is kind of quickly leaving, which I'm always kind of bummed about. But nonetheless, it was a good scout yesterday. It was just good to get out and do some walking. I didn't find anything terribly impressive. So this was actually a piece where I had 2 cameras stolen last year. So the particular area where the cameras were stolen, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to a different area. Those were kind of risky setups to begin with, because it's the easiest. I won't say it's the easiest part. Well, it is the easiest part to access. But I have had good deer on camera in the past, and I hadn't had anything stolen, and I actually had a really good encounter there. I guess it was 2 years ago. So I had some cameras up and they got stolen. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the part where I don't think anyone is going to be. And that's what I did last year. Hung some cameras, didn't really see anything, a couple small bucks. But there was a particular part of this piece that I had never scouted. It was kind of in the back corner of the place, kind of a shitty walk to get to, for a bunch of different reasons. But I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can make my way back there and check out this one point. So made my way back there, and lo and behold, there was nothing. On my way back, there was kind of like I don't know, I guess an old light line or gas line or something like that. I kind of checked out. There was some rubs along that. There was a little patch of hemlocks and some pine that I kind of meandered through. You know, and this was like the second area I wanted to check out because I could see on the map. I want to look at like the state game lands maps and stuff like that there's supposed to be some oak trees back in this area. So I was like, you know what, if I can go back there and find some white oaks, it might be worth just kind of a camera, or maybe even just a fly or sit during the fall whenever maybe the wind isn't right for some of the other places I want to hunt, just to kind of, you know, suss it out. So I got back in there and nothing. I mean, there were some red oaks and stuff like that, but there just wasn't anything for deer signs. So that was all kind of a bust. But it's better to know now than to figure it out later. And so now I know, you know, I don't have to spend any time there. Unfortunately, the best spot to kind of hunt in that entire piece was actually the areas that I have had cameras stolen. So, you know, maybe we'll make our way back in there. But overall, I think this spring has been pretty good locally for kind of picking out some new spots. I got a couple new kind of setups to check out, to have cameras soaking on. I've got some historical places that have been, you know, good to me historically. And so I think locally things have kind of rounded out. And of course, you know, in going up north, that place is really kind of rounding into shape, and I'm super, super stoked to get up there this fall and do some hunting. So one more spot to kind of check out, during turkey season probably. And then we'll call it a day, at least for the breaking new ground. And then it'll be all about, you know, a couple turnarounds and making sure all the cameras are out, to start catching some velvet popping. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just get jumped into today's show. Have my good buddy Bill Thompson on. Bill's been on one other time. Bill owns the Spartan Forge mapping app that I've been using for the past, I don't even know now, probably the past 2 years. And they got a bunch of cool stuff that's coming out. Some new kind of mapping features and just some overall new features for the app. And then they have a desktop model, I believe, that's also going to be coming out, which is awesome for those of us that do like to kind of hop on a big screen and kind of dive in a little bit further. But during this session, you know, Bill, last year, you know, we talk a little bit about, you know, when you get into the hunting business, so to speak, you know, friends of mine have warned me, at least, that when you're in the hunting business, you don't hunt nearly as much as those who are not in the hunting business. And every one of my buddies who legitimately work in the hunting industry, that is 100% true. And so Bill kind of found that out this past year, but he had some really good hunts, did some really cool stuff with a veterans hunt that they're going to be doing again this year. And then he did manage to make his way to Scotland. And one of the things I've always wanted to do was to go kind of couple a family vacation, you know, overseas or somewhere, and do some hunting somewhere kind of brand new. And so that's something else that we talked about, because he had a great hunt while he was in Scotland. So with that, we're going to go ahead and just get jumped into today's show. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. This evening, you'll recognize the voice on the other line as my good buddy, Mr. Bill Thompson, Spartan Forge. What's going on, brother?
Hey, bud. How are you?
I'm good, man. So so it's been, I'm trying to think how long it's been since you've been quote unquote retired, because you retired from one thing, then you kind of jumped from the, you know, right in from the frying pan into the fire, right? But
absolutely.
How long has it been since you've been a civi?
So I retired. Okay, so there's like two. So I started my leave. I had like almost, I think, 4 months of vacation banked when I got out. And so I should say when I left the military, so I signed out on leave. So I'm technically like still in the military, but I believe that was in like late July or early August. I can't remember when that was, but I ended up starting too late. But anyway, I had all those days banked, but I actually signed out of the military, like was officially done on 1 November.
Okay.
So, but it's been, you know, yeah, absolutely out of the frying pan into the fire. Like I took a little bit of a vacation right after I got out of the military. I went with my fiance to Scotland for like 2 weeks and did an awesome stag hunt out there that we can talk about later. And then came back here and basically just worked on the application until now. I'm still working on. I'm still, averaging between 10 and 14 or 15-hour days right now, just until this next update that we'll talk about later gets out. I'm sure you'll ask about later.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much been since then. If you were to ask me how long ago that was, it feels like I've been out of the military for 18 months or 2 years, and it's been like a few months.
Right. Nice. So it's yeah, dude, definitely from the frying pan to the fire. How was I want to ask you about the stag hunt, of course, but how was your trip to Scotland? Because I actually went there. My wife and I went there on our honeymoon. This was eons ago because we've been married. I hope she's not listening. I want to say I think this is year 18 this year or year 19. I can't remember.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, but yeah. So we spent a little bit of time in Scotland as well, and it was one of the coolest places I'd ever been. Like just the culture's cool, the scenery's cool. It's one of those places where I'll definitely be going back at some point. And I can't say that about every place I visit. So how was your stay in Scotland?
I love Scotland. My fiance's family's from Scotland. Her sister lives there still now. We've been going there every year there now for the past few years. Obviously because we can get away for it pretty cheap. We just set up price alerts, wait for the flights to get below $400. They get below $400. We get picked up at the airport and we're staying with her sister. So, I mean, we can get there and, sounds like a big expensive trip, but we're getting away with it once a year for less than $2,000.
Right.
So it's awesome. I love it. I mean, how can I put this? This is going to sound really stupid. Like, obviously the culture is awesome. I love the museums. I love the history. I have a bit of a rebel stripe in me when it comes to I just love the story of Scotland and big middle finger to the king and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I love it. I love going out there. I love the weather. A lot of people don't like the weather. I love light rain and light cold. I'm always hot. I'm sweating right now, and I've got about 60 degrees in here. And then I love good beer. So those two things, and then being able to go check out museums or do a stag hunt, and I love good scotches and stuff. So I loved it. It was a great time, and it's an amazing place, and I recommend anyone who hasn't been to go.
Yeah, for sure. I always tell people that too. There was someone who I met not so long ago. I forget who it was, and I think they were getting ready to go to Scotland, and I was like, dude, you're gonna have a blast. I was like, it was one of my favorite places to go. And I think the thing that people, if they don't travel, if they don't get the opportunity to travel outside the US, and when I say outside the US, like somewhere over, in Europe or whatever the case is, like we get a sense of history in the States when we see different things. It's like, oh, this is a couple hundred years old. It's like when you go over there and you're looking at something, it's like a whole different level of historical context. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've got, now there's an awesome pub that I went to in Edinburgh, and I'm going to have to look it up because I don't want to mess the year up. And they've got in the back, I want to say it's a weird name, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's like bowling, but you essentially have a bowling alley. It's a small ball, kind of like duck pin, which you guys do in Pennsylvania, right?
I've never heard of it, but yeah, sure. We do all kinds of weird
shit. You've never heard
here.
of duck pin bowling?
No.
It's like miniature bowling. I thought it was a Pennsylvania thing. But anyway, you set up your own pins. So like you have a bowling alley, you walk down the side, you set up your own pins. That bowling alley's been in that form since like the 1800s.
Jeez.
Like the same setup in wood and everything.
Right.
And the pub itself, I believe it's in Edinburgh, but I want to say it's something like $13.99 or something like that.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
It's like way, way older than anything that we have over here.
Yeah.
And going in there and just like getting a pint, and the bar's pretty much set up the way it's always been set up. I mean, that to me is just, I love that kind of stuff. Like that just blows my mind.
My favorite place to visit while we were over there was actually Perth. I think was my favorite place to go. That's along the sea, right? If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So there was.
I just looked it up. Before we forget, I lose this. It's called the Sheephead Inn, and it was opened in 1360.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's amazing. It's in Duddington, Edinburgh.
Yeah, we stayed in the Kingdom of Fife, which was like 40 minutes, I want to say, north of Edinburgh.
Yeah,
I think it's.
We traveled the whole coast. Like we did a trip around the coast, and 2 years ago we went there in January, and I jumped into, I think it was the North Sea. I jumped into the North Sea when it was like 31 degrees or something like that. And we did it again this last year, a different part. But yeah, I mean, it's just
Right.
one of those places where you get to experience it all.
Yeah. Good beers, good scotches. I'll have to share the full deets on this, maybe not on the podcast, but I may or may not have got into an altercation at a pub on my honeymoon, which is
Sounds like Scotland.
yeah, exactly. There was a little bit of there was some disrespect from an Englishman, and I didn't take well to it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. I became like the pub hero for the night. It was kind of funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then there was a really bad incident with like the bartender. He came back to our place, and like I had to throw him out. It got weird.
That's awesome. You got to tell me that story afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. But man, how was the stag hunt, dude? That's killer.
It was awesome. It was like it was not at all what I expected. You know, like I haven't done a lot of Western hunting. In fact, I've done very little. I've not done. I guess the closest thing I've done to it was maybe like moose, where you're really like running around a lot. Mm-hmm. But the thing with Highland stag hunting is just like covering as much. They are bugling or whatever it's called all the time, like all day long. They're bugling. So it's not like you're trying to get the one to call back to you like you would with an elk or even like hunting a buck. You just sit and listen and you wait and then you run towards wherever they are. And the only thing about it is if you want to be super successful and do it for cheap, you need to be in really good shape.
Right. Okay.
Because there's these like massive properties, thousands and thousands and thousands of acres. And you just got to find out where like where the hot, they call them hinds, mm-hmm. like where the hot hind is, and then wait for a good stag to show up that's like protecting her from the rest and is waiting to mate. And so we went all day and finally like found a proper stag, like a massive stag for the last part of the day. And we had like an hour left to sundown, and it was like a 230-yard shot. And the stag was not getting into, like, it was basically behind like a hind, and it was trying to like angle around her, and he was basically facing us the whole time, and the guy didn't like the shot because you have to go in Scotland. You have to go with a guide. You can't go alone. You have to be with the guide. So we just kept waiting and waiting. And finally it got like broadside, and he's like, "Do you think you can make this shot?" And I'm like, "I'm pretty sure I can make this shot." Like, you know, I had only shot at like 100 yards, but you know, it was a 30-06, and you know,
right,
you know, a couple inches up, and you're good to go. And so took the shot and dropped it, and I've got an awesome video of the whole thing, and yeah, I'll send you the picture afterwards, so maybe you can use the picture, the grip and grin for the podcast.
Well, I know you texted me one. But yeah, send me a fresh one that I can use. But yeah, that was, and just the scenery there. It's funny because when people think of Scotland or Ireland or whatever the case is, they think of like, oh yeah, it's nice and green, right? But until you're like there and actually seeing it, like it doesn't, pictures that you see or what you see on TV or whatever really just doesn't do it justice until you're there, and just like how green and like alive and vibrant everything really is.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Like the picture you sent me it looked like a still image that was taken from Lord of the Rings, and they put you in it. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's what it looked like.
That's a good description of it, because it really is like you have these like postcard images of what these places look like, but it's so there were parts on that, like we had driven far enough and gone long, and like we had a vehicle and we'd, you know, put on probably 15 or 20 miles that day. And certain parts of it, you would think you're in Oregon or something, or like in the West somewhere. And then, you know, you just get to a side of the mountain where the wind's not as much, and now it's turning green and lush, and it looks more like traditional Scotland. So it's just, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those places where if you haven't been, you definitely have to put it on your bucket list to go check out. And I think that what you mentioned about having to go with a guide, like that, people, I forget where we were looking to go on vacation. It might have been like Iceland or something like that. I think we were going to try to go to like right before like all the weird pandemic stuff kind of like happened and stuff like that. And I was looking, I was like, oh, cool, we'll go to Iceland. You know, I'll try to find somewhere to hunt. It was the same thing. Like, it was kind of, at least for this family trip particularly, it was kind of cost prohibitive to do, because you have to kind of have a guide and you have a specific place that you can hunt and stuff like that. And it's not, I think as much as we complain about things, I think in the States about hunting, when you go other places and try to do it and you come back, you realize, man, we got it pretty good here as far as being able to hunt wherever we want, however we want, within reason and within regulations.
Yeah, I mean, in Scotland, it was beautiful, and I loved it, and I'll do it again probably. But like, the guy has to have the rifle the whole time. You're not allowed to carry it. You're not allowed to handle the meat. You're not allowed to dress it. Like, I wanted to dress the animal. I was like, hey, can I dress this? And he's like, why? I'll dress it. And I was like, well, because I want the experience. Like, I want to go through And he's like, well, we have to get a certain permit from the government in order for you to be able to handle meat that people are going to consume.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? It's like, I just shot this thing.
Right.
And it's like, well, no, this guy has to take a course every year and show that he knows how to handle wild game meat and so that it's fit for consumption. And it's just like, holy smokes, man.
Yeah.
Like the thumb of government is out here on the side of this mountain where we're, 40 miles from anybody.
I know, right? What are they afraid? Like all of a sudden, like a drone's going to drop out of the sky
right,
and like
exactly.
be taking video of it all. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy, man. So how was the rest of your season, man? So you were in Scotland for a period, getting after stags, got you a good stag. You get back here or maybe you were here first and then went there. I can't remember exactly how the timing worked out, but how was your US season? Maybe we'll say it that way.
So I think I won't say who it was because I don't want to name drop. I hate when people name drop. I was talking to somebody prominent in the hunting industry, and he was asking me how my first year of hunting was going because I knew him from a few years back, just when I was just hunting and kind of like doing stuff through the military, and I knew him through other guys. And he was like, how is it going in hunting? And I said, well, I'm about to have my second year of not killing a buck in a row. And generally, I'm getting one every 2 years at least.
Right.
Like 3 years ago, I had 3 in 1 year. And when I mean a buck, I mean like good bucks, like 140 plus. And he said, yeah, if you want to be successful at hunting, don't get into the hunting business.
Yeah, man, it's funny you say that, man, because like every one of my friends who are in the hunting business, and when I say hunting business, not like media side, but like company or product like ownership side of things, right? It's the same thing. Like my buddy Chad.
It's your busiest time of the year.
Yeah, Chad, my buddy. I mean, Chad from Exodus. Yep. He's very, very picky about what he kills because he's killed. No, he's has Boone and Crockett's on his wall, so he's pretty choosy. But he'll go it's nothing for him to go 4 years and not kill anything. He'll see some like 130s, maybe a 140 and pass it or whatever, but to your point, it's like as he was building his business, I think he feels now, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I would assume he feels kind of like he's at a point, or the business is at a point where he is able to kind of step away. He has staff now. He can like walk away for like a week if he wants to and go hunt. And this was really the first year that I've seen him do that in all the years I've known him. And so you're 100% right, man. All my buddies who work in the space, it's like they always say that. They're like, man, be careful what you ask for because you're not going to hunt nearly as much as you do now, probably.
Yeah, and it's funny because, well, there was a conflation of things that happened to me this year. Well, I didn't get, so long story short, we were trying to get the app out by October 1st. And back to back, and not to get like Drew, like, in the dumps here, it's just the reality of the situation. My co-founder's father died from COVID in Florida, and he had to leave and take care of his father's whole estate, which moved our timeline to the right because he's, one of the major implementers on the project, and he was gone for like 2.5 weeks. As the day after he gets back, my mother dies from COVID. Or not from COVID. My mother dies from COPD. His father died from COVID. And then I had to leave.
Yeah.
So we didn't end up getting the product out until like November 6th. Obviously, you got to take care of that stuff, but it's just like, the consumer on the consumer side of the house, as they shouldn't, they don't care about what's going on. They just want the product.
Right.
So, everyone's like, where's the product? I thought it was going to be out in October. What's going on? And we had all of this stuff going on. And then we finally got it out on, I think, like November 2nd or 3rd. Like, obviously, we had the testing version out before that, and we had a few thousand people on the testing version, but the actual full product release wasn't until November.
Right.
So all of October, generally, that's when I'm doing my scouting. As I'm starting to look for like fresh scrapes, especially on public, because they're not always in the same spot. Like my method during the rut is very scrape centric. Yep. So October for me is spent just looking for scrapes and running cameras over scrapes. And I didn't get to do any of that this year. And then we had, right during prime rut, we had our veterans hunt, which was, one of the most amazing experiences of my life. like truly, and we're doing another one this year. And so when we did that veterans hunt, my first experience with a good buck, it's a pretty funny story. I was taking out a buddy of mine who was, we were in two different troops. He's in the Joint Special Operations Command, and I was attached to a troop when we were in Afghanistan at the same time. Mm-hmm. And he was out on this veterans hunt because he's also a pro staffer on the company. But his thing is like Western game and bear, and where he lives, that's really what he's focused on. And he just moved out to the East Coast here a few years ago and really hadn't done any whitetail hunting. So I took him out whitetail hunting, and he was inside of this like Dryad saddle. Have you heard of Dryad? I'm not even dropping names for them because I don't use saddle. I've used a saddle once in my life.
I was going to say, I saw a picture of you in a saddle, and I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, but that was the only time I've done it. So, but what I'm saying is like, I'm not plugging like, well, actually, no, I will plug. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm going to do it because of the nature of the story. He was in the saddle, which is essentially like a big sleeping bag.
Oh, I have seen those. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's like a big it's like a hammock, like a big hammock is the best way to put it. And he had it up, and it was cold outside. It was blowing. It was like November 7th or something like that, or 8th maybe or something. And we were in this good spot that I knew had good deer coming through it. I scouted it with a buddy of mine earlier in the year. I knew it was a good spot, and like we hunted there for 2 days and did not see squat. Well, maybe we saw a doe or something.
Right.
But I just, these mountain bucks, I knew eventually at some point a buck was going to travel through. And so the last day that he could hunt, that afternoon, he was actually texting me, trying to talk me into getting down. They're like, hey, can we just, like, it's 4 p.m. Let's just go. And I'm like, no, dude, it is magic hour on like November 8th or 9th or whatever.
Right, yeah.
It's like, this is the time. And he's like, well, my fingers are cold, blah, 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 whatever. And so I was like, just wait another hour and a half or whatever it was. Sure enough, at like 10 to 5, like a 140, chocolate antlered 140 comes walking through, and I'm staring at it, and it's like right under me. And I could have, put an arrow right in him. But I wanted my buddy to take him because this was a veterans hunt, and this guy's active duty still, and I want him to be the one to kill it. How would it look if we do a veterans hunt and the only guy that kills is the CEO of the company? So I'm texting him. I'm trying to text him, and I'm like, hey, dude, what's going, like, are you going to shoot this animal? Like, what's going on? Like, this is a prize buck right here, this, especially for this area that we're in. And he's not moving over there. And I see his elbows kind of like moving, and I'm like, okay, he must be getting himself ready or getting the saddle down or moving slowly. And like 3 minutes go by. I'm just dropping him text messages. And finally, he's like 30 or 40 yards away from me. So this buck is angling away from him. So I'm just like, meh, to try to get his attention. And the buck looks my way and then starts taking off. And then he drops his head out of the saddle and looks, and the buck's taking off. So all he saw was a buck running away from him. And so, yeah, that was my first like large buck experience this year. And then I hunted near there by myself, like December 2nd, in a separate spot in like a bottom. And I had, it was rifle. It was the opener of rifle, or right after the opener of rifle. Maybe it was the 6th of December. I don't remember. But again, in Pennsylvania. And I had like probably 140 class again, just behind trees that I didn't see when I was coming down a point. All I saw were a bunch of does. So I was trying to get down this point because I'd seen bucks rutting in the area a couple of days earlier, and there was, some rutting activity going on. And so all these does were together. I sneak down, I'm looking over the does, and all of a sudden I like just for no reason just look to my left, and there's like a 140 class buck looking straight up at me. And his body was behind trees. All I could see was like part of his face.
Yeah.
And he's just staring right at me, like he has my number drawn. And I'm staring at him, just waiting for him to step out. He really just needed to take like a step or two out. And all of a sudden, this younger buck comes through and just nails this whole group of does and just starts like just going through this group. And all of the does got up and ran, and then he ran. So that was my second experience this year. But I only hunted on my own a whitetail. Well, the veterans hunt, I was taking out somebody else, and we saw one good buck during that veterans hunt, and that was in PA. And then on my own, I think I hunted 4 or 5 times. Right. So, that's what it was this season. I did kill 5 doe this year, or 4 doe this year.
Nice.
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, at least 4 doe this year.
Right. Some freezer meat. That's always good.
Yep. And then I did a hunt with the Seek One guys out in Atlanta where I killed 2 bucks or 2 does out there as well.
Nice.
Where we were just trying to stack does.
Nice.
So yeah, it was four does in the is good for me. I'm totally happy with that.
Right, and you got some good stories, man. Those are good stories. But it sounds like you and I need to hunt together, because my season this year was like yours. I won't tell the story again because people listening to this show are probably sick of me talking about it. But multiple near miss opportunities in Kansas and 2 near miss opportunities in Pennsylvania on target deer. And so my theory is like next year I'm going to be filling tags: Idaho elk, Pennsylvania mountain buck, and then likely Kansas. Like, so I was like, that's what I'm saying. It's like I had bad luck last year, so this year means all the tags I get are going to be filled. At least that's what I'm saying now, right? It's like the offseason of the NFL. You know,
right.
the Jaguars always have hope this time of year. You know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I'll be able to spend more time hunting this year. And we'll have this veterans hunt that I'm going to get ready for. I'm going to head back up. I've been scouting some with John Stewart for the veterans hunt next year. We've identified a couple good spots. He's got some places down in Ohio. We're still trying to nail down exactly where we're going to do it. Right now, it's a toss-up between doing PA again, Ohio, down in the Shawnee, or in North Dakota.
Right.
So those are like the 3 places we're looking at doing our veterans hunt this year. But the veterans hunt last year was awesome. Nice. I think we raised like $5,000 for the boot campaign. We ended up getting 4 or 5 guys out there, got them a bunch of gear from a bunch of companies, a bunch of like trail cameras. There was a couple of bows given away,
nice.
A bunch of First Light camo, and some saddles. And yeah, it was a good time. It was awesome. So we really look forward to doing it this year, having a lot more lead time this year too as we get ready for it. So.
Right.
More people can enter it, and hopefully we can raise more money for these veterans associations.
So what was the most rewarding part of last hunting season? Knowing that you had some near misses and stuff like that, but when you walk away from it, you look back at it, what was the most rewarding part of it?
I guess the most rewarding part. So there's a couple, right? And so there's a couple things that I think of when you ask that question. The first thing is if you like look at our Instagram, I think we posted 4 or 5 guys who took like their first big deer this year that they've been targeting, where they kind of, a couple of stories, guys were like, I just wanted to trust your neural network and just not hunt till it told me I should be hunting, and get the pressure off the deer. Obviously they had heard me on podcasts like ones like this, because people always ask me, okay, how do I use this neural network? It's like, well, it kind of depends on how you're set up and if you own the land or not. Yeah. It's not something that's just going to tell you how to kill deer. It's something that you still need to scout when you're using it. You still need everything else needs to be there. And this should do is give you a nudge one way or direction or the other on choosing stands or when to go and actually hunt. So guys would message and say, I trusted the neural network. I did X, Y, and Z, and I got on my first big deer. And none of these guys were like, of course, I'll get those messages where somebody's looking to like get on the pro staff, or somebody's trying to do X, Y, or Z, and they're just whatever. But these guys are just, I think we probably had 25 or 30 or so where they were just genuinely excited about their first large buck on the ground or their first doe on the ground. And so getting those messages and hearing from those people and that kind of affirmation of what I'm trying to do, which is just make people more successful when they're afield, was awesome. And so that's what I've been oriented towards doing and what I've wanted to do. And then doing it also at a price that's tenable, that for especially, people from my background where there's not a ton of money to spend, you can still get it done and you're getting a lot more product for a lot less buck. That was awesome. So doing that was great for me. And then I guess the other thing that I immediately thought of when you asked that question was, we had, when I was with the Seek One guys in Georgia, we were hunting, doing like doe, just basically trimming down their doe population on the properties they had access to, where the does were super, there's too many does. Mm-hmm. There's just so many does down there. And you wouldn't believe how many deer you see in some of these areas, just because, and they're all, some of those areas, those deer are not healthy. Mm-hmm. So they need to be thinned out just so there's enough food. But then I think we killed 13 deer in like 3 days or 2 days, all with bows. And then all of that went to, needy shelters and needy families in the area.
Cool. Yeah.
So, having a great time doing that with people that you enjoy their company. Crispy was out there as well with the Seek One guys. Having those guys out there, having a good time, cutting it up, slinging some arrows, no pressure about killing big bucks, just trying to, knock down some does and have a good time doing it. And knowing it was going towards a good thing. It's like you're getting all of the positive reinforcement and emotion that you can get, right? Like you're doing what you love, you're hunting, you're with good friends, it's getting donated. There's none of the pressure that you might put on yourself when you're trying to kill like a big buck. It's just like all of those things put together. It was extremely rewarding, great time.
Nice.
And I had a lot of fun doing it.
Nice, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I like going back to the neural network piece. I love that people are, inquiring how to use it. I've certainly had people reach out to me and say, hey, how are you using this thing? And like you said, it's kind of use case specific. It depends on what you're hunting, how you hunt, and those types of things. And I'm very similar to you, where I hunt a lot of scrapes, and that's kind of what I focus on. And I've run trail cameras over them for periods of years, and I kind of know when scrapes are going to turn on or off and things like that based on, the annual data. And then what I really have been using the neural kind of network for is that if I know I'm in the window, let's say because it played out like this year, I hunted that evening of the 22nd. So I left it dark, whatever it was, like 6:30 roughly, I want to say it was like maybe October 22nd. I don't remember exactly what time it gets dark. Let's just say 6:30. And the buck I was trying to kill came through the next morning. I think it like between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. So I literally missed him by like hours. Right. And the reason why I was at that spot and not another primary scrape that I had him on previously was that the wind was wrong for me to hunt that spot first and foremost. And then when I looked at and I knew he was bedded close to that spot because I was getting him at like just crazy times of the day. And I actually had him bedded in that scrape multiple times.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew I was close to his bedroom. And when I looked at the neural network and it was telling me that it was going to be a transition area day, what that told me was like, all right, I'm still going to have a shot to kill him, even if I'm a little outside of his bedroom. I can be a little further away where I can have a better wind and try to kill him there. And that's what I've kind of told people. It's like, that's a lot of times how I'll use it. It's like, I definitely use it to watch movement, but still wind is going to trump everything if I have the right wind and everything for the spot. I was like, but then what I use it for is that, do I have one or two other spots in and around where I'm trying to kill that deer that are better for the wind that I have? And are they in those transition areas that on those transition days that I can use those versus like pushing too much risk into his core area? I was like, and that's really how I started using it. And that's just how it works for me based on how I hunt. Other people might use it differently, but that's the example I always kind of give people.
Yeah, that's a great usage of it. I have a buddy down south too that had a buck that he knew was bedding on a property he had no access to, but he found with like 70 or 80% accuracy where he had his camera set up when it was a full range day, he would see that buck over on this other property. In other words, the buck was really leaving a long ways from his core area, and he was out there either searching for hot does or just, for whatever reason, the neural network was, predicting pretty well when this deer was going to be moving more than often. And as soon as he told me that, he started just getting all core area days where he was never seeing the deer. And then he waited for the first full range day, which I think he waited like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And on the first full range day, he went into the spot that he had access to. And sure enough, that buck showed up at last light and he put an arrow through it. And, it was a massive buck. I mean, a massive buck.
Right.
So that to me, like those two scenarios, you still have to scout. You still have to know what's going on in the woods. You still have to know what the winds are. It's every, a lot of people, my son all the time will send me screenshots from like bow hunting forums where people are talking about Spartan Forge and the neural network. And a lot of guys will be like, I don't need a neural network to tell me how to hunt. Fine. That's great. I get it. Like, and I'm not trying to build something that's going to tell you how to hunt. Like, that's not the point. The point is you're probably a busy person with a job and a family. And you don't have time to sit there and pour through all of your notes and research and weather and all of those things. And if a neural network can just kind of nudge you in one way or the other because it's built on real life data, and it can save you time. Either you get this guy gets more time with mama or his kids or whatever, and can still be successful. You still have to know all the other factors.
You still have to be a deer hunter at the end of the day, right?
Yeah,
it's another input. And that was the one thing for me this year. And, I'm still a deer hunter, but I was certainly factoring in things that I was learning and picking up from the app and stuff like that, especially like the neural network stuff. And I hunted way more strategic this year than I have probably in years past, and probably was more patient than I have been in years past. And I had more bow range encounters with target deer than I have had probably the past 2 years combined.
And that says a lot up where you are, because it's hard hunting up there. It's not, it's not agricultural farm country, which there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Right. Like I go to the Midwest and hunt. All I'm saying is when you're having more successful if you're having a successful encounter with big deer in places like Pennsylvania or something like that, or New York, and you have 2 or 3 of those a year, that to me is a successful year in itself.
Yeah. That's what I always kind of explain to people. I'm like, if I have one really good quality encounter with a deer that I'm targeting, I was like, that to me, that was a good year. I was like, cause some people won't have a encounter with a target animal, during the course of the year, I was like,
or ever.
Yeah. I was like, and sometimes like this year was just behind brush, couldn't get drawn because he was looking in my direction, just like stuff like that. That's just bow hunting. I was like, and it's like, I beat him at the game. I won the chess match. I just didn't finish. You just couldn't finish him off. Right. And that's just like a whole other evolution when you get to that Andy May level where it doesn't matter. The deer's dying.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's why I kind of assembled the pro staff the way that I did, because our pro staff are guys that and gals that consistently get it done in places where most people think big deer aren't there or haven't been there in years. Like whether it's Andy May in places like Michigan, or it's Johnny Stewart in Pennsylvania, or the Shawnee, one of my favorite things to do is just go scouting with John, because it's just, it's a master level course in woodsmanship. Yeah. And you're spending 2 hours with the guy in the woods, and you're getting more than you'll get from 15 hours of YouTube videos.
Yeah. And you'd be hard pressed to find a nicer guy too, willing to just share.
Absolutely.
That's the thing I love about Johnny is that, he's killed a lot of really good deer, and he's very unassuming, and he is just, and he's even said it to me. He's like, look, I don't need, he's like, yeah, if I have a good one, I want to go kill it. He's like, then I'll try to go kill it. He's like, I'm at the point now where he's like, I've got plenty of deer on the wall that are good bucks. He was like, I really just want to see other people kill deer, you know? And I was like, and that says something about not just how good he is as a hunter, but also just, the type of person that he is,
Yeah. And I think that's the natural evolution of like the ethical hunter.
I would agree with that 100%. Yeah.
I think you get to a point where you more enjoy watching the youth or people new to bow hunting or converting people, get the shakes from loosing an arrow on a doe than you are about doing it yourself. And but he can still do it on his own if he wants to. That's the thing. Like he set up our whole veterans hunt as far as like spots and places to hunt and stuff. And 3 or 4 of those guys had encounters with mature deer, and all of them saw deer. And that is no small task to get
in that
done
area.
In 4 days.
Yeah.
For that area of the Allegheny, it's just like you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because you let anyone else just go select stands or just go look for spots. People who don't know that area, like Johnny or Bo Martonic, do, and you're lucky if you see a deer.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so everyone saw deer. Everyone saw bucks, and 3 or 4 of the guys saw 130, 140 plus bucks.
Right.
Including us. So, my hat's off to those types of guys.
Nice. So, man, now that we're down the road here a little bit as far as like, the app is launched, and I know we're going to get to the updates here because you got some cool stuff that's coming, but people have had a chance to have it in their hands and use it. You've got some of those success stories, and I certainly have used it and have had, success with it in terms of helping me be in the right spots at the right time. If you take a minute and you just kind of look back and you think about, the performance of the app and just like what you've learned after aggregating all the collared deer data that you had to kind of aggregate to make this thing come to life. What are some of the things of the collared deer data or just deer behavior in general that you've learned through this process that kind of really stick out to you, whether it's like specific behaviors, trends, scrape activity? Is there anything to you that kind of really sticks out that, that popped out to you after you kind of launched this project? You had a chance to step back and be like, wow, I didn't think that was actually happening.
Yeah. So I guess so this isn't going to be as sexy for everyone as it probably could be. There are some things that are, insane. Like you wouldn't think this happens with deer, and I can tell those stories, but I've told them on other podcasts. One of the ones that I've not really talked a ton about, in fact, I think I've only talked about it on one other podcast, is when it comes to scraping activity. Now, when I break down collared deer data, and I'm just simply plotting the points of a deer, and then maybe I get some GPS data where there's 2 or 3 mature bucks in that GPS data from a particular region where they will interact with each other. Then I'll plot all of those deer and look at their behaviors in the same like temporal breakdowns. So like I'm looking at these 3 deer during pre-rut, rut, post-rut, secondary rut, and then winter time, essentially like end of season. And one of the things that I see in there, and I'm still actually, so we have 3. Well, I should say right now we have 1 academic that I work with pretty much all the time when I'm looking through this data, and it's something I've been kicking around with him. I don't think he has looked at the data in the same way that I have, because he's looking at it with the eyes of an academic or of a biologist, whereas I'm looking at it with the eyes of a hunter, and those are 2 very separate things.
Yeah.
There are some academics who are starting to like adopt or like try to pull out information that's good for hunters. But we have some really interesting podcasts coming up that'll be on the Spartan Forge channel that are just focused on getting hunters in the room with academics and talking about these types of things. So I'm pretty excited about those. One of the things that I want them to talk about, and this could be a little bit of a primer for that, is it seems to me that there is scraping that is specifically for mature bucks, or at least bucks that know what they're doing in the woods. The usage of these scrapes increase, and they're usually only near buck bedding that is adjacent to other buck bedding. So you can think about it this way. And now this is not a hard and fast theory. None of this is proven. This is all conjecture.
Yeah.
This is just my observations, and it could just be that this is just the data that I've looked at. So don't take this to the bank. But you can think about it this way. Say you have a big ridge system with like 3 fingers coming off of it. And all of the fingers present ample opportunities for buck bedding, especially during the early season. Okay, so I'm going to try to, so for people who are listening, I'm going to try to build a visual. So you're facing an east to west ridge system, and then so let's just say you're on the north side of that ridge facing the east or west ridge system. And then you have 3 fingers that are all coming towards you or near you. And you might say that that's like the bowl at the bottom where all those ridges come together. So you're staring up and looking at that ridge system with the 3 fingers on it that are coming towards you. Just if that makes sense. Am I making sense?
Yeah, it's like almost like a turkey foot or something like that. Would be
coming off the ridge system like that. Right?
Yep.
So what I'm seeing in the data, especially like mountain data and eastern part of the U.S. data, I'm not seeing it as much in the Midwest, but really in the East, is somewhere at the top of that ridge between these fingers, there will be, especially leading up to the rut, a scrape up there that all of these bucks are checking pretty regularly. And the doe data that I see don't have a ton of doe going through and checking through this scrape. So I've coined it a competition scrape, or like a kind of like a scrape for deer to say who's who in the zoo for bucks. And I don't find that like 1 or 2 year old deer check them a ton. What I'll find is, and it's only at night, so it's not something you really want to hunt until it's close. Now, if it's getting close to the rut, you can hunt them.
Right.
I shouldn't say that. They will check them very close to the rut. But generally, if you were to run a trail camera over these and look at them, bucks are either walking downwind of them and not working them, especially mature bucks, or when the mature bucks are working them, they're at night. So it's not a good place for hunting, but it is a good place to get an inventory of bucks when you find these types of scrapes. And I've only been looking at this for about the last year, but now every time I get new GPS data, it's the first thing I do when I plot and look for the data. Is I look for these types of what I'm coining as competition scrapes. So it could be, now again, I feel like I should set all of these primers because, I'm not an academic. I'm not looking at this with the eyes of an academic. I haven't put this through any peer review. These are just my theories. It could be that, I get more inclusive data that's got more younger bucks and more does, and it turns out they're working them just as often as other ones do. That doesn't seem to be the case in the data that I'm looking at. It seems like there are specific scrapes that are meant for the wiser bucks of the woods to kind of get an idea of who is who, and that is the purpose of it.
Right. Well, I mean, if you think about it, just in theory, it makes sense, right? It's like, because those secondary ridges, oftentimes are where bucks want to bed, right? Because it gets them away from the primary traffic of any younger deer or does or anything like that are using the ridge system to travel, right?
Yeah.
And if it's right outside their bedroom, and just say, for example, that there's a buck bedded on each one of those ridges, why wouldn't they check, right? Like they're going to pass by there just by, if for nothing else, by happenstance with relative frequency, just based on the location of it. You know what I mean? So it makes sense to me, and I'm trying to think of like places where I may have seen that, and I can't. I'm gonna be looking for that now because it just makes too much sense.
Yeah, and like I said, I need to look at this with more data. I've got maybe 3 or 4 studies where I see this, and I've got something like, 70 studies of data. Mm-hmm. But I haven't gone back and looked at these old studies, and a lot of studies don't just focus on bucks. So a lot of studies will have, in fact, I would say a lot of my deer studies have maybe 10% of the deer are bucks. Right. And then 90% are either young bucks or fawns or does, because they're trying to look at fawn recruitment, or they're trying to look at effects of wolf population or coyotes on deer. They're not necessarily concerned with, big old bucks.
Right.
Plus they're harder to come by and trap.
Yeah.
So my data definitely probably has bias. There's probably some flaws there. And so I'm going to look into it more. But it is one of the things that I plan on talking with some of the academics as we do these podcasts over the summer going into next year that we have on board now.
Nice. Awesome, man. I'll be looking forward to checking those out, because I always kind of nerd out on anything that is kind of like biology driven, I guess, if you will, and deer data driven. I just think there's a level of insight there that, can take you years to get in the woods, right? From a woodsmanship standpoint, right?
If you ever get it.
That's a great point. If you ever get it, right? And it doesn't mean that you're not a great deer. You could be a great deer hunter and still just never come across that or see it often enough to actually make the connection, right? And that's what I think is so cool about deer data. So, man, you have all this, you've had all this, data now at this point, and you've been kind of, working through the app. It's been launched and stuff like that. I'm really stoked. I'm gonna, kind of tell the folks that are listening, I got a chance to get a sneak peek to like the stuff that's coming, like the new updates. And I'm pretty stoked on the things that you have coming up. And so I want to take some time now just to kind of get a sense of like, what can people expect in the next evolution of Spartan Forge, not, in the immediate future? And then what are some things, if you can talk about any of them, that are things that are kind of like further down the road? And you don't have to give details. I don't want you to give any details necessarily, but just like, is there anything that you can wet people's whistle beyond the things that we have that are like in the here and now? So let's do the here and now that we have. I think it's roughly next week sometime, I think is when the updates are coming out.
Yeah, so I plan to have them out in the next week. Of course, testing always gets a vote, and if I find some major bug or something, the one thing I've learned is I'm trying to shy away now from exact dates when it comes to releases, because there are too many factors that I don't control. Yeah. I find a bug, and then how long does it take either our guys or a testing crew to run through and fix a bug, and then retest the bug and get people out in the woods testing it. And that's what our pro staff does. So, we implement a fix to a bug, and then some of the guys who help me with testing, like Bo Martonic or with Johnny Stewart or Andy, all those guys use test versions of the apps. They might be like, hey, I have Friday I can go out and do this, right? Because they're all working too. Right. So and then I'm waiting on that. So, and then on top of all of that, I submit these builds to Apple, and then Apple can take between the quickest I've ever seen them improve an update is 4 days. Yeah. The slowest is 15 days. Yeah. So it can be 2 weeks after I even have something ready to release So I preface all of that in saying, people who listen, I hope they have some understanding that we're still a small company. I think the last time you and I talked, there were 3 of us. Now there are, I think, 10 or 11 of us. So we've grown a little bit, but, we're certainly not like, 70 people like some of these other shops that are doing these types of apps have. But so on the horizon, the immediate horizon, very quickly, we have what I'm calling like the Lambda Map, which is essentially, we have maps right now that you can swipe through. You'll be able to access this. Lambda Map will act as a 4th layer. And that 4th layer will have, it's just a fully customizable map as it relates to trails, property ownership data. We've added a ton of property ownership data, even from our last build. And there's property ownership, there's agricultural data, there's forestry data, there's trail data. And you can basically just check boxes and highlight what data you want on your individual build of the app. And you can swipe through that. And so you'll have those 3 standard layers, which are just kind of, the idea with this was, if we have guys who are just really simple with how they want to use apps, which is, look, I just want to drop pins.
Right.
And I everything else is just, this app is to get me out of the woods in the middle of the night, to look at the weather and to look at your neural network. And I don't need all of this other stuff. Well, then they have those 3 swiped maps that they can go through. And we'll also make it so you can access it through the maps button. We're going to add that here pretty soon. But so they have that simple version of it. But then that 4th layer, that Lambda Map, is for people like yourself that really want to get deep into the data, and they want to, I want to overlay property data and agricultural data on the same representation. And then I want to look at where that might overlay with, new cut trails. And I want to get 6 miles away from all of those things. And, I just really want this esoteric representation of all of this data that nobody else may want, and I want it readily accessible. So you can set that up, and all of that's there. That we've, I believe our mapping data for what we call our high resolution data, which is between 5 and 15 centimeter resolution on the satellite imagery, which is like, it's so high resolution that if the angle is right, you'd be able to like see people in the windows of their houses.
Right.
We had about 20 or 25% coverage of the U.S. Now we're at about 40 to 45% coverage of the U.S. And we're also introducing between 2 and 7 years of historical imagery on those specific areas. But again, it's only 40% coverage of the U.S. But then we've also bought 2 new U.S.-wide maps and Canada-wide maps that are inside of there now too. So we're adding 2 maps, plus we're adding all of that high-resolution data. And all of that's accessible through that Lambda layer. But then another cool thing is you can mark like access to property, and we will update you if your property access is changing or if it's changed.
That was super cool, man. For like, you can say, hey, I have this, I got permission on this piece, you mark it. And then if it changes, and you can actually mark the condition by which you have permission. It's either I asked Bill if I could hunt his property. He told me no. So I mark it, and then I mark it that he told me no. And then I know maybe I need to go back and follow up the following year and see if I can. Then there's like, you can mark it for conditions. So it's like, yeah, I got access, but I'm only allowed to shed hunt and turkey hunt it. And then you know that, right? And it's like, and then well, can I sweet talk him the next year and maybe get like access to hunt does? And then maybe you get full permission and you mark it as full permission. But if for some reason Bill sells his property, I get a flag or I get a notification that I think you said updates quarterly or roughly or whatever, or something like that. To where it's like, now I know that like, hey, Bill sold his property. If I want to hunt it next year, I need to go back and talk to the new landowner and see if I can procure the same type of permission, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, one of my biggest ways of being successful, especially on public land, was gaining alternate access to public lands by knocking on doors.
Yeah.
So if somebody owns like 0.3 acres, but it butts up against public land, and the deer aren't used to people accessing from there, or it's saving you a 2-mile walk, I do a lot of that. Yeah. But then we also work with the Seek One guys who are on our pro staff, and they are knocking on doors all over, and you might have 7 or 8 houses that all share like a backyard that works out to be like 3 or 4 acres, and lo and behold, there's a 180-inch deer walking around in there because it's never been hunted before. It's all been left alone. So they knock on. I mean, it is insane when I go through their data how many doors they knock on. So when you start talking about people who are successful with suburban hunting or alternate access to public land, you're knocking on a lot of doors, and this keeps track for you. Visually, you can show it the layer on your map and see where you have access, where you don't, and where you might need to seek access. But then you can keep it consistent between layers so that you can always monitor your access. And like you said, it'll update you if access is changing or records are changing. So yeah, I see that as an invaluable tool for people, especially when, and a lot of people are like, oh, I'm public land hunter, so that doesn't really matter to me.
Access onto public land, like there's, especially if you live around where I live, I mean, there's so many private property pieces that butt up against the public where getting access through those are critical. Like there's one specifically I can think of that I just can't get access. I can't get permission to access through a piece of private. And I almost don't hunt it anymore because it's literally, the only access option you have that's public accessible is the worst possible access for the entire piece. And so I stopped hunting it. I had killer deer in it the one year and I just couldn't get in without them knowing.
Yeah, so don't let me not talk about that problem that you have right there, because I have a feature I think is going to help for that, exactly what you're talking about. But I got to get to that when you talked about what's off in the distance. So the other thing was that we're coming out with later in the year is we had our topography and aerial imagery artificial intelligences that basically do an analysis of property that you want to hunt to tell you where you might want to scout, or where you might want to look, put up some cameras or hang stands or whatever. We were trying to get that artificial intelligence out over the spring here. It's not performing. It's performing well, but it's not performing at the level where we felt confident about it being in the market. But we do anticipate having that out at least during next hunt season. Mm-hmm. If I were to go into the how complicated that tool is, I think people would, get pretty excited about everything that's going into that. But, we work on that in the background, but of course we're trying to maintain all of these other updates while we do that. So, I
was just going to say the other feature I really like too is, being able to kind of flip back through the map through time and see how it has changed. I know that's one thing that, a lot of guys, we'll say old school guys, before there were map apps that were available that were using old school Google Earth, you know what I mean? And then using the timeline to kind of like look through it. That was one thing a lot of dudes really liked, was to be able to, not just from year to year, but almost even from like season to season. Like, hey, when do the leaves drop, or when does it become bare? Or just kind of knowing how the foliage changed, or knowing, hey, this new clear cut I just found, how old is it? I can't find any data on the age of this cut. Let me scroll back through time and see when the cut happened. So stuff like that. It's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of this, that data will be available, and it's about 40% of that data will have between 3 and 8 years of historical imagery, but we are fanning out to include more areas. So not every area is going to have that type of thing, but what we'll have later in the summer is people will be able to, for a small fee, it's going to be, 200 acres will be like 10 or 20 bucks or something like that. So, right. But anyway, you can order and choose your time of the year and have that imagery delivered to your app. That'll be later in the year.
Right.
So if we don't have it organic in there, it's just, it would probably be between 25 and $30 million for me to order all of this imagery for all of the United States. And then I'd have to charge people through the roof for that access to give everyone that. And it just wouldn't, the business model wouldn't work. Right. So what we're doing is we've made an agreement with a company where you'll be able to basically draw a polygon, and then you'll get a return that shows you all of the historical imagery for that area. And then you can choose what you want to download for an extra price. Now, that feature is not for every Tom, Dick, and Harry. That is for psychos like you and I that really are willing to pay an extra 25, 30, or 50 bucks.
Right.
To order some area for a public piece of ground. Mm-hmm. And to us, that's what, especially people who count their time as valuable.
Yeah.
Like I can either go out and spend, 18 hours looking at this 10,000 acre piece of land for all of the recent cuts, or I can pay 50 bucks and order it for this, or $100 and order it for this place and just go through it quickly. If it's not in our organic offering that we're giving people, then they'll be able to get to it that way. So that is a piece that's coming later. The other piece that I wanted to talk to you that'll be coming later over the summer kind of nests with two things. But essentially what we're calling it is Blue Force Tracker. And Blue Force Tracker is a term from the military that means like my buddies, like say you're doing a military operation, there's this piece of kit called an ATAC in the military, and it will essentially show you if the battle space hasn't been deconflicted well, it'll let you know if there are other friendlies in the area so that you don't engage in friendly fire and kill an American or something like that. So it's called a Blue Force Tracker, Blue Force being, friendly forces. Right. And then, well, not just Americans, it could be UK, it could be New Zealand, Aussies, whatever. It's just making sure we're not shooting somebody who's on our, because Pat Tillman, for instance, was killed by friendly fire in the beginning of the war. So that was so we've adopted that. And what we're doing is there will be two things you'll be able to do with Blue Force Tracker. Say you and I are, good buddies who scout the exact same area. Like maybe you and Chad have like a piece of public that you both are constantly scouting. Mm-hmm. You'll be able to auto share points between you two, and you'll be able to see where each other are going in this area as like a safety feature. If you project your GPS, then Chad will know when you're hunting. Maybe you two get a lease together. Right. It'll tell you where everyone's been in there historically. It'll tell you, you'll auto share points between each other, and it'll be like an organic, low friction way of understanding how you and your buddies are all using one space. So say you guys all go in, save up your money and buy a 10,000 acre lease together when you're 60. Right. And you're like, you want to auto share points between each other. You want to know what stands are getting hunted the most, where people are being successful. You'll be able to auto share all that. But to your point earlier, when you talked about not being able to gain access, one of the things we're doing is we're going to build a free version of the app that you'll be able to pass to landowners. Oh, that's cool. So you'll be able to go to a landowner and say, hey, I want to use your property for access, or I want to hunt your property. And they're kind of like, well, I don't know how I feel about hunters, or my neighbor had a bad experience. Then you can say, hey, look, get your smartphone out, download the landowner free version of the Spartan Forge app. You'll be able to see if you draw a polygon around your property, I'll allow you access, and then you can see exactly how I'm using your property. So if you tell me, hey, my wife and kid play in the backyards on Thursdays and Fridays, so you can hunt Monday to Wednesday, then I can as a landowner make sure you're only in there Monday, Wednesday, and I can see your GPS points inside of my property. Right. That's cool. You know that people aren't abusing access. They're not, using someone's property to hunt like the neighbor's property that you couldn't get to or something like that. It's just the goal there is to reduce friction between the hunter and the landowner. And then the other thing too, it would be like if you're in the West where you have this landlocked land, people don't want people on that property because they want to either protect their hunting rights or they've had bad experience with hunters. It's much more of a problem out West than it is here. Well, again, you can give them that app and just say, hey, download this free version of this app. And you're going to be able to communicate with me through the app, drop points, or say the landowner is like, hey, I saw a massive buck the other day. He was right here. They can drop you that point, and then you'll be able to see it on their property. Nice. But then also they'll be able to see what you're doing on the property. And again, the goal there is to just encourage access, reduce friction between landowner and hunter, and propagate hunting culture to people who might be wary about it or worried about how their land might be getting used or whatever. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I love that, dude. Those last two are super killer, dude. Like I think the landowner play is slick. Just because even if they give you access, it's like you kind of have to, especially if you don't know the person, you're just kind of blindly throw and trust that this person's going to do what they say they're doing, right? And it's like, I don't know you from Adam, so I'm just taking a leap of faith here that you're going to do what you say what you said you're going to do. Yeah, and for the landowner and the hunter, right? Like say the hunter's back there, and the mother or the father can look at the app and say, oh, Clint is back in the woods. I'm not going to send Johnny back there to go play with his buddies because he might mess up Clint's hunt, or Clint might think there's activity, or there might be a deer coming and the kid pushes them, or they're molesting the property or whatever. So and they know when each other are back there. Again, it's a safety thing, and it helps everyone out involved. Yeah. Communication is key, right? And that's just another forum. Yeah, and it just brings less friction to the communication. So you're not texting and bothering them. They're checking on you when they have to. And again, for people who are listening, they can only see what you're doing inside of that box. Right. So that property, right? So they're not seeing you everywhere. They're just seeing you inside. Yeah, they're not big brothering you. They just know what's going on on their piece. Yeah, and either can remove access and say, I don't want to share this anymore. And then, the landowner can say, okay, if you're not going to share your location inside of my property, then you can't hunt the property.
Right. Yeah. Makes it easy and clean.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So one of the questions I always get, and I don't know, I truthfully don't know. So I wanted to ask the question, whenever people ask me about the app, I give them like the down low and like all the stuff I like about it and how I use it and stuff. And then they inevitably ask me, hey, if I'm going to transition from one app to another, can I move my waypoints from Garmin or from whatever? You know what I mean? Like if maybe they have an inReach they use when they go out west, right?
Yep.
And they want to use a phone app just because it's more convenient, and maybe they still have the hardware piece for like SOS. I use mine for SOS whenever I'm in like, places where I might get into a situation where I need a holy shit button.
Yep.
Is there something coming that they can kind of transition those waypoints from, an app, or whether it's from a Garmin unit or whatever the case is?
Yeah. So as long as the product or the app that you're using produces a KSV or a KML file that can go on an SD card or a binary file. So like the other hunting apps that are out there allow you to download your points so that you can display them in like Google Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The other prominent ones do, and ours will as well. Then you will be able to, with our online web app, which will be out this spring sometime, like basically all the Spartan Forge features, but on a computer, you'll be able to download your points from other apps. Then you just drop them into the import file on Spartan Forge, and all of those pins will pop up on the screen.
That's awesome, man. I love that. That's killer.
Yeah.
Because I think, that's one of the things, like people's waypoints, man, it's like gold, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's like, I always understand their trepidation, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. I'm like, but you just need to take the plunge, and whenever it's there, then you port them all over, and then you're good to go. So
yeah, and I mean, speaking of people's waypoints being gold, we triple back up all of the points. So as long as you have service and you've touched our system, we have a sync button and we triple back up points. So even if Amazon East goes down, like all of the servers in Amazon East go down and there's an outage, we will be able to migrate your points where they're backed up in a separate part of the US and make sure that you never lose your points. Because I know a lot of people who use some of the other bigger apps. In fact, Levi Morgan, who's on with us now, left the last app that he was using. I don't like to talk smack, so I'm not going to say the name. But 3 times he lost like 2,000 plus points.
Oh, it happened to me. Like it happened to me previously. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
So,
yeah.
So what had happened? So we triple back up all of that stuff. And if you reach out to us either through our Instagram or through the support at SpartanForge.tech, we can get your points back on your device as long as you entered them and got service.
Right.
Now, if you're offline or in the middle of nowhere and you entered some points, then you drop your phone in the river, I'm not going to be able to get you those points.
Right. Those are in the river.
Those are in the river. Yeah, exactly. As long as you reconnect to the network,
right,
and you push that sync button, it should automatically update. But sometimes if you're being paranoid like me, I always just push the sync button.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, then you know that they're backed up and we cannot lose them.
Right.
Jeff Bezos would have to nuke his whole infrastructure in order for us to lose your points.
And he ain't doing that because he just got divorced. He's got to pay his ex-wife.
Yeah,
man.
he's got to pay that money so she
That's
can donate
right.
it.
Got to get that money. Awesome, brother. Well, hey, dude, I want to be sensitive to your time. I know we both got family and stuff. I'm gonna actually try to eat some dinner, I think. But before I let you go, let folks know where they can find out more about Spartan Forge, where they can get Spartan Forge content, and where they can kind of follow along with everything you guys have going on.
So if they just go to our Instagram, there's a link tree in there that gets them on our YouTube, that gets them on our Facebook, that gets them to our website. All of that is in there. We will be putting out content and videos and through our pro staff over the spring and the summer. We will be doing another veterans hunt next year, so look out for that. We're about to do a pro staff get together, an archery shoot, and we're going to be recording videos for how people use the app, how things I would call them military best practices. All of those things, that military best practices for hunters, all of those things will be getting recorded and released over the summer, and they'll be able to find those on our YouTube or through our pro staff's YouTube. And then just go follow us on Instagram. And if they have questions, like I answer probably, if you say, hey, this question's for Bill on the Instagram when it comes to deer, I devote my Friday mornings prior to my workout when I'm taking my no explode, about 2 hours in the morning, where I just answer questions from people about deer movement or about how to use the app or features that are coming out, or take ideas that people have. And I implement most of them. So, I mean, that is,
Nice.
that, you know, I've gotten 2 or 3 ideas from people that I've implemented that are just Joe off the street who's like, hey, I think it'd be cool if it had this. And then I just do it. One of them was the moon overhead underfoot, moon rise, moon set, having that on the main content bar and other stuff. So you're not going to get that from any other company.
Yep.
I'm going to do that whether we have 20,000 users or 150 or 300,000 users. I will devote my mornings to making sure that people know that this is a product for hunters and by hunters, and that they can reach out to me anytime they need to.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, man, I dig the app. I've been using it. People need to check it out, need to get on it and get it. It's obviously available on the wherever you get your iOS app, you know, your iOS app store and your Android app store. You know, people can find it there. Always good catching up with you, brother. Get yourself some sleep, man. Don't work too hard. I know you're in the fire now, but civi life isn't too bad once you get on the other side of this.
You're right. I appreciate it, man. And good talking to you too. Stay in touch.
All right, buddy. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. If you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Spartan Forge, Exodus, and Skull Brew Coffee Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.